ranger's voice came through my radio at 2:17 a.m., asking if I had made it back to the trailhead yet. The problem was, I was standing right next to him, and he was staring at me with the same confused terror I felt, because his radio was still clipped to his belt, and neither of us had pressed the talk button. Let me back up. My name's Joel Bridger, and in late September of 2019, I was working my second season as a backcountry ranger in the Gila Wilderness, New Mexico. If you've never been, the Gila is massive, over 500,000 acres of some of the most remote country in the lower 48. Cell service doesn't exist out there. Roads end miles before the wilderness boundary. It's the kind of place where you can hike for 3 days and never see another person, which is exactly why I loved it. I was 28 then, fit enough to handle the long patrols, and experienced enough that the isolation didn't bother me anymore. That September, I was assigned a 3-day solo patrol along the Middle Fork Trail to assess damage from the monsoon season. We'd had heavy rains that summer, the kind that wash out trails and drop trees across paths. My job was to hike in, document what needed repair, mark hazards, and report back. I left the trailhead on a Tuesday morning, pack loaded with everything I'd need: 60-liter pack with a tent, sleeping bag, bare canister with 3 days of food, water filter, first aid kit, and my ranger gear. That included a Garmin GPS unit, paper maps of the wilderness area in waterproof cases, bear spray on my hip belt, and a satellite phone for emergencies. The sat phone was expensive to use, so we relied mainly on our handheld radios for check-ins. Dispatch expected a call twice daily, morning and evening, to confirm position and status. Before I left, the senior ranger, a guy named Frank Holloway who had worked the Gila since the early 90s, pulled me aside. Frank was in his 60s, lean and weathered, the kind of guy who looked like he'd been carved out of the same rock as the wilderness he protected. Middle Fork, right? He asked, squinting at my route map. Yeah, up to the junction with Little Creek, then loop back. He was quiet for a moment, then said, if you see yourself on the trail, turn around immediately and don't look back. I laughed, thinking he was messing with me. Frank didn't laugh back. I'm serious, Joel. It's happened before out there. You see someone who looks like you get the hell out. Don't try to figure it out. Don't investigate. Just go. I nodded, still not sure if he was hazing the newer guy or genuinely warning me. Frank wasn't the type to tell campfire stories for fun, but the warning was strange enough that it stuck with me as I started up the trail. The first day was textbook patrol work. The trail climbed steadily from the trailhead at just under 6,000 feet, winding through ponderosa pine and Douglas fir. The monsoons had hit hard. I documented 2 major washouts in the first 5 miles, both requiring switchback reconstruction. A massive alligator juniper had fallen across the trail at mile marker 7, too big to move without a chainsaw crew. I marked it with flagging tape and logged the coordinates. By late afternoon, I'd covered 11 miles and reached my planned campsite near Middle Fork Creek. The site sat in a small clearing with a fire ring made of stacked stones surrounded by tall pines. The creek ran about 30 yards away, swollen and loud from recent rain. I set up my tent, filtered water, and ate a cold dinner while watching the light fade through the trees. The forest settled into its evening sounds, creek water rushing over rocks, wind moving through pine boughs, the occasional snap of a branch. I'd spent enough nights in the back country that these sounds were comforting, familiar. I checked in with dispatch at 6 p.m., gave them my coordinates, confirmed I'd made camp. Everything normal. I slept well that first night. The next morning, I broke camp at first light and continued north on the Middle Fork Trail. The path followed the creek for a while before climbing away into drier country. The vegetation shifted from creekside willows and cottonwoods to more open terrain with scattered pinon and juniper. Around 9 a.m., I stopped to document another washout, and that's when I first noticed the boot prints. They were fresh, pressed into a muddy section of trail about 20 yards ahead of where I'd stopped. That wasn't unusual. Other hikers use this trail, though not many this late in the season. What made me pause was the tread pattern. I wore Danner Mountain Light boots, a specific model that a lot of backcountry workers used. The tread had a distinctive pattern, and these prints matched mine exactly. Not just the brand, but the wear. My right boot had a smooth spot on the heel where the tread had worn down unevenly, probably from the way I walked after an old ankle injury. The print ahead of me showed that same wear pattern. I stood there, studying the tracks. The logical explanation was simple. Someone else wore the same boots with similar wear. It was a popular model. Plenty of rangers and serious hikers used them. The odds weren't that crazy. I kept walking. Over the next hour, I'd see the prints appear and disappear. Sometimes they'd be clear in a patch of mud, then nothing for a quarter mile, then show up again in dusty soil. The spacing and depth suggested someone roughly my size and weight, moving at a steady pace. By midday, I stopped for lunch on a flat rock overlooking a small canyon. I ate a protein bar and some trail mix, drank water, checked my map. I was making good time, ahead of schedule. After I finished, I packed my trash carefully into a side pocket of my pack. We followed strict leave no trace protocols. Everything you carried in, you carried out. As I stood to shoulder my pack, I heard whistling. It was faint, coming from further up the trail, a simple melody, 7 notes that repeated. My dad had taught me that tune when I was a kid. It wasn't a song from the radio or anything well known. It was something his father had taught him, probably something passed down from his father before that. I'd whistle it sometimes on patrol, usually without thinking about it. My dad had died 6 years earlier, and the tune was one of those small things that kept him close. I called out, "Hello?" The whistling stopped. "Hey, anyone there?" Nothing, just wind and creek sounds in the distance. I waited another minute, then started hiking again. 20 minutes later, I passed a rock on the trail side. Sitting on top of it was a protein bar wrapper, the same brand I'd eaten for lunch, same flavor. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands. It looked fresh, not sun faded or weathered. I checked my pack pocket where I'd stored my trash. My wrapper was still there. 2 identical wrappers, same brand, same flavor. I looked around, scanning the forest. Nothing moved. No sounds except the ambient noise of the wilderness. I added the second wrapper to my trash pocket and kept moving, but my awareness had sharpened. Something felt off. Around 3 p.m., my radio crackled. Unit 7, this is base, radio check, over. That wasn't unusual. Dispatch sometimes did random checks between the scheduled morning and evening calls. I reached for my radio, about to respond, when I heard my own voice come through the speaker. Base, this is Unit 7. I copy you clear. Over. I froze, hand on the radio. I hadn't pressed the transmit button. The voice was mine, exactly mine. Same cadence and tone, even the slight drawl I picked up from growing up in southern Colorado. Unit 7, confirm your position. Over, dispatch said. I'm at mile marker 14, just past the wash near Dead Horse Canyon. All clear. Over. I was at mile marker 14. I was just past the wash near Dead Horse Canyon. My thumb moved to the transmit button, but I hesitated. What would I say? That someone else was using my call sign and giving my exact position? That I had just heard myself on the radio? Copy that, Unit 7. Thanks for the check. Base out. I stood there on the trail, radio in hand, staring at it like it had just grown teeth. My heart rate had picked up. I did a slow 360, scanning the forest in every direction. Trees, rocks, shadows, nothing else. I clipped the radio back to my belt and forced myself to keep moving. By 4:30, I was approaching a section where the trail made a long switchback up a ridge. The path ahead was visible for a good 200 yards before it curved out of sight. That's when I saw him. A figure in a ranger uniform, maybe 150 yards ahead, walking at a steady pace. Same build as me, same pack profile. I couldn't see details at that distance, but the uniform was Forest Service tan and green, same as mine. Hey, I called out, my voice echoing slightly. The figure didn't stop or turn around, just kept walking. I picked up my pace, not quite jogging, but moving faster than my normal hiking speed. The figure ahead maintained the same distance. When I slowed down to catch my breath, the figure seemed to slow too. When I stopped completely, it stopped. It never turned around, never looked back, just walked. I tried calling out again, no response. The rational part of my brain threw out explanations. Maybe it was another ranger on patrol, listening to music, couldn't hear me. Maybe the distance and terrain were playing tricks on my perception of how fast they were moving. Maybe they just wanted to be left alone. But something felt wrong. The way it moved was too synchronized with my own pace, and why wouldn't another ranger respond to a call? We were the only two people likely to be in this section of wilderness. I thought about Frank's warning. If you see yourself on the trail, turn around immediately. I looked at my map. If I left the trail here and cut cross country to the east, I could intersect with my day one camp in maybe 3 or 4 hours of bushwhacking. It would be rough going, but doable. I'd be retracing part of my route, but I could explain it to dispatch as a precautionary move due to what? Feeling spooked? The figure ahead had disappeared around the switchback. I made the decision fast. I stepped off the trail and into the tree line, heading east. Bushwhacking in the Gila is not casual hiking. There's no trail, which means you're constantly navigating around fallen logs, pushing through brush, scrambling over rock. The terrain doesn't care about your schedule. I kept my GPS unit out, following the bearing back toward the Middle Fork Creek drainage. The sun was getting lower, painting everything in amber light that would be pretty if I wasn't suddenly hyper aware of every sound and movement around me. Around 6 p.m., I should have checked in with dispatch. I pulled out my radio and pressed the transmit button. Nothing. The channel opened. I could hear the carrier wave, but my voice wouldn't go through. I tried again. Same thing. The radio was receiving fine. I could hear static and faint cross chatter from other frequencies, but I couldn't transmit. Then the radio crackled. Base. This is Unit 7. Evening check-in. Over. My voice again. Clear, calm, routine. Unit 7. Go ahead. Over. I'm set up at the established site near mile 18, just past the ridge junction. Weather's clear. No issues to report. Settling in for the night. Over. Copy that. Unit 7. Have a good night. Base out. I stared at the radio. Mile 18 was where I should have been if I'd stayed on the trail. I was nowhere near mile 18. I was off trail, scrambling through forest and fading light at least 2 miles from where I had just told dispatch I was camping. Something was impersonating me on official channels. I tried the sat phone next, powered it on, waited for it to acquire satellites. 3 bars. I dialed dispatch directly. The call wouldn't connect. The screen showed it dialing, then just dropped. I tried twice more. Same result. By 7 p.m., I knew I wouldn't make it back to my day one camp before dark. Hiking off trail at night was a good way to get hurt, and I was already rattled enough without adding a twisted ankle or a fall into a ravine. I found a spot near a dry creek bed, a small flat area backed by a tumble of large boulders. The rocks would provide some protection, and the creek bed, even dry, felt like a boundary of sorts. I didn't examine that feeling too closely. I set up my tent quickly, working in the last of the twilight. I didn't start a fire. I didn't want to announce my position. I ate a cold dinner, drank water, and sat with my back against one of the boulders, listening. The forest at night has its own rhythm. Insects, the occasional owl, whined through the trees. These sounds should have been familiar, but that night they all sounded wrong. Too sharp, too deliberate. I must have dozed off sitting up, because I jolted awake at 2:17 a.m. according to my watch. The sound that woke me was footsteps. Someone was walking around my tent, not close, maybe 20 or 30 feet out, circling slowly. The footsteps had a specific pattern. Step, step, slight drag, step. That was my gait. My right foot dragged slightly because of the old ankle injury. I'd broken it badly in my early 20s, and it never healed quite right. Most people didn't notice, but I could hear it in my own walk, especially when I was tired. The footsteps matched mine exactly. I was in my tent, sitting frozen, not breathing. My headlamp was off. My knife was in my hand, though I didn't remember drawing it. The footsteps continued circling, steady, methodical, patient. Then they stopped. Silence for maybe 30 seconds. Then the sound of my tent vestibule zipper being pulled down from the outside. The zipper was slow, deliberate. Someone was opening my tent. I didn't move, every muscle locked. I was staring at the tent wall, watching for shadows, for any indication of what was out there. The zipper stopped halfway down. Then I heard breathing. My breathing pattern. I have a slightly deviated septum, makes a particular sound when I breathe through my nose, especially when I'm stressed. The breathing outside my tent matched that pattern perfectly. Then my own voice, barely above a whisper. Joey. That was my childhood nickname. Only my father had called me that. Not Joel, not Joe, Joey. He died 6 years ago, and no one else had used that name since. Joey, come out. Let me see you. The voice was exactly right, every inflection, but the words were wrong. The phrasing was off. My dad would never have said it like that. I stayed frozen, knife gripped so tight my hand cramped. The breathing continued outside for another minute, then the footsteps resumed, moving away from the tent, circling again at a wider distance. My radio crackled. Unit 7, this is Unit 3. You up? Unit 3 was Tom Vickers, another ranger who worked the Northern District. We overlapped sometimes on patrols. Static, and my voice. Yeah, I'm up. Go ahead. Just checking in, man. Dispatch said you sounded tired on the last call. Everything good? All good. Just a long day. Appreciate the check. Cool. Get some sleep. Unit 3 out. I was listening to myself have a conversation I wasn't having. The radio traffic sounded completely normal, exactly how I'd respond to Tom checking on me. The footsteps outside had stopped. I couldn't hear anything except my own heartbeat and the radio static. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat with my back to the tent wall, knife in one hand, bear spray in the other, counting seconds until first light. When the sky finally started to brighten around 6 a.m., I moved fast. I tore down camp in under 10 minutes, stuffed everything into my pack without my usual care for organization, and checked my GPS. Middle Fork Creek was a mile and a half northeast. The creek was running high from monsoon rains. I had seen that on day one. Running water, a boundary. I started bushwhacking toward it, moving as fast as I could without being reckless. The terrain was steep in places, covered in loose rock and thick brush. I didn't care. I needed to reach that water. Around 7:30, I heard the creek before I saw it. The sound of fast water over rocks grew louder as I pushed through a final section of scrub oak and emerged on the bank. The creek was running hard, maybe 30 feet across, the water brown and churning. On the opposite bank, maybe 50 yards upstream, someone was standing. It was me. Same uniform, same pack, same build, but I could see the face clearly in the morning light, and it was wrong. All the features were in the right places. Eyes, nose, mouth, the shape of the jaw, the haircut, but the proportions were slightly off, like someone had described me in detail to an artist who had never seen me, and they'd gotten it 90% right, but that last 10% made everything look uncanny. The eyes were a bit too far apart. The mouth was a fraction too wide. The nose sat at a slightly wrong angle. It was wearing my face like a mask that didn't quite fit. It didn't move, just stood there, watching me. I looked at the water between us, then back at the figure. Who are you? I called out. It didn't answer, didn't move. I looked for a crossing point. The water was too fast and deep to wade straight across, but downstream, about 40 yards, the creek widened and looked shallower. I started toward it, keeping my eyes on the figure. It didn't follow, just watched. I reached the crossing point, tested the depth with a stick. It was waist deep, moving fast, but manageable. I unclipped my hip belt and sternum strap so I could ditch my pack if I got swept off my feet, then stepped into the water. The current hit hard immediately, pulling at my legs. The water was ice cold, snow melt from higher elevations. I focused on each step, picking spots where rocks provided stable footing. Halfway across, I looked upstream. The figure was still there, standing in the same spot. I made it to the far bank, scrambled up the muddy slope, and looked back. The figure was gone. I stood there, dripping, scanning the opposite bank. Nothing, no movement, no sound, except the creek. I hiked for 6 hours straight after that, following the creek drainage until it intersected with a trail I recognized, then pushing hard back toward the trailhead. My radio stayed silent the entire time. I didn't try to call dispatch. I just moved. I reached the trailhead at 2:17 p.m. Tom Vickers' truck was parked there, and he was leaning against it, drinking coffee from a thermos. "Joel, man, you look like hell," he said when he saw me. "Tom, did you call me last night?" "What? No. Why would I call you at night?" "On the radio. Around 2 a.m. You asked if I was okay." He shook his head. "I was asleep at 2 a.m., Joel. Didn't call anyone." I pulled out my radio, checked the log. The call was there, logged at 2:17 a.m., Unit 3 to Unit 7. Tom looked at the log, frowned. "That's weird. That's my call sign, but I didn't make that call." We drove back to the ranger station in silence. When we got there, the district ranger, Linda Pacheco, was waiting. "Joel, glad you're back. Everything okay? Your check-ins were solid, but you came back a day early." "Linda, can I see the radio logs from my patrol?" She pulled them up on the computer. 3 days of check-ins, all logged, all with my call sign, all marked routine. "Can you play the audio?" I asked. She clicked through to the archive recordings. My voice came through the computer speaker, clear and routine. "Base, this is Unit 7, morning check-in. Over." That was from day 2, when I'd been off trail, unable to transmit. "Base, this is Unit 7, evening check-in. Over." That was from day 2 night, when I had been in my tent, listening to footsteps outside. Every single check-in was there. My voice, my speech patterns, my call sign, but I hadn't made half of those calls. Linda looked at me, concerned. "Joel, are you feeling all right? Did something happen out there?" I started to tell her, then stopped. What would I say? That something was impersonating me? That I'd seen myself across a creek? That my dead father's nickname came out of the dark? Tom put a hand on my shoulder. "Let's get you home, man. You need rest." Linda didn't push it, but I could see her watching me carefully. That evening, back at my apartment in Silver City, I got a call from Frank Holloway. "Heard you cut your patrol short," he said. "Yeah. What happened?" I told him everything. The boot prints, the voice on the radio, the figure on the trail, the thing outside my tent, the crossing at the creek. Frank was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Come by the station tomorrow. There's something I need to show you." The next morning, Frank met me in the archive room, where we kept old incident reports and patrol logs. He pulled out a file box labeled 1994. "Read this," he said, handing me a report. It was dated August of 1994. A ranger named David Kern had been on a solo patrol in the Middle Fork area. He'd made his scheduled check-ins for 3 days, everything routine. On day 4, a hiker found his camp abandoned near mile 18. All his gear was there, tent set up, food and water untouched, but Kern was gone. Search and rescue mobilized. They spent 2 weeks combing the area. They never found him. The strange part was in the addendum. After Kern disappeared, his radio continued transmitting. For 3 days after the search started, Dispatch logged check-ins from Unit 5 Kern's call sign. His voice, his speech patterns, giving position reports and confirming status, but nobody was at those locations when teams checked. On the third day, the transmissions stopped. They never found his body, Frank said, and they never figured out where those transmissions came from. I looked at the report, then at Frank. Why didn't you tell me this before? Would you have believed me? He had a point. What do you think it is? I asked. Frank shrugged. Don't know. Something that lives out there. Something that learned how to sound like us. Maybe it's always been there, and we just don't have a name for it. The old Mimbres people who lived in these mountains, they had stories about things that wore human faces but weren't human. Those stories are older than our wilderness designation by about 1,000 years. Do you think it got Kern? I think Kern didn't make it to water. I handed the file back. I'm putting in for a transfer. Frank nodded. Probably smart. I left the Gila National Forest at the end of that season, transferred to a different forest in Colorado, less remote, more developed. I still work as a ranger, but I don't do solo patrols anymore. Always go out with a partner now. Sometimes I wonder if that thing is still out there, still using my voice on the radio, still making check-ins that dispatch logs as routine. I wonder if there's another Joel Bridger walking the Middle Fork Trail, answering calls, following protocols, while the real one moved on. I know this sounds impossible. I know the rational explanations: stress, isolation, dehydration, maybe some kind of auditory hallucination. But I also know what I heard, what I saw, and what Tom's radio log showed. I know that thing knew my father's nickname for me, something it couldn't have known unless it had gotten very close, close enough to hear things I'd whispered to myself when I thought I was alone. If you're ever on patrol alone and you hear your own voice on the radio before you transmit, get to running water immediately. Don't try to correct dispatch. Don't investigate. Don't engage. Whatever is using your voice doesn't follow you across moving water, but it will keep using your credentials, your call sign, your voice for as long as it wants. And eventually, it might decide it doesn't need you anymore. If you see yourself on the trail, Frank was right. Turn around and don't look back. But if you can't turn around, if it's already behind you and ahead of you and circling your tent at night, then head for water. Fast water, running water, the kind that makes noise and moves with purpose. Cross it and don't look back until you're on the other side. And if you ever get assigned to patrol the Middle Fork area of the Gila Wilderness, maybe ask for a different assignment. Some places have things living in them that we don't have names for. We just have warnings passed down from rangers who saw something they couldn't explain, who made it back to tell someone to be careful. I made it back. David Kern didn't. That's the difference running water makes. I realized the man in my back seat wasn't breathing at 3:42 a.m., somewhere between mile marker 81 and 82 on Highway 50. The problem was, I'd checked my rearview mirror 30 seconds earlier, and the back seat had been empty. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Marcus Webb, and in October of 2021, I was working as a long-haul truck driver for a food service distributor out of Salt Lake City. I was 31, had been driving professionally for 8 years, and I'd done plenty of overnight runs through empty country. That was the job. You drove when normal people slept, you covered routes that weren't profitable enough for daytime shipping, and you got comfortable with long stretches of absolute nothing. Highway 50 through Nevada is called the loneliest road in America, and that's not marketing. It's a legitimate description. The route cuts straight across the state, 300 miles of high desert, scattered towns that barely qualify as towns, and vast stretches where you won't see another vehicle for an hour or more. Cell service is spotty at best. Radio stations fade in and out. It's you, your truck, and a whole lot of empty. I'd been assigned a run from Ely to Fallon, a straight shot west on 50, 310 miles, roughly 4.5 hours of driving under normal conditions. The cargo was routine, food service supplies for a restaurant chain, nothing temperature sensitive, nothing hazardous, easy run. The kind where you set the cruise control, keep your coffee hot, and let the miles roll by. I was driving a Kenworth T 680, a decent rig with a comfortable cab and good visibility. The truck had just under 200,000 miles on it, well maintained, reliable. I had been driving this particular unit for 6 months and knew its quirks. The CB radio had some static on channel 19. The air conditioning ran a little cold on the passenger side, and the driver's seat had a worn spot on the left bolster where I always sat. Familiar details. Comfortable. Before I left the yard in Ely, the dispatcher, a woman named Carol who'd worked there for 20 years, handed me my paperwork and said something I didn't think much about at the time. You're running 50 tonight? Yeah, straight through to Fallon. She looked at me for a moment and said, Don't stop unless you have to. I laughed. I never stop unless I have to. That's how I make time. I'm serious, Marcus. If you see someone on the side of the road, don't stop. Call it in on the CB. Let the highway patrol handle it. But don't stop. I'd heard stories about Highway 50. Most of them involved breakdowns in the middle of nowhere, running out of gas, or hitting deer. Carol's warning seemed weirdly specific, but I nodded and told her I'd be careful. I pulled out of the yard at 11 p.m. The temperature was already dropping, probably down to the low 40s. October in Nevada gets cold at night, especially at elevation. The sky was clear, full of stars, no moon yet, perfect conditions for a night drive. The first 20 miles out of Ely were uneventful. The road was empty, my headlights cutting through the darkness, the white line on the shoulder reflecting back. I had the CB on, scanning through channels out of habit. Most of the chatter was quiet, a few truckers further west talking about weather and road conditions. Nothing unusual. At mile marker 23, I saw the first one, a figure standing on the right shoulder, thumb out, classic hitchhiker pose. I was doing 65, and in the second or two that my headlights illuminated him, I registered a few details. Male, average height, wearing what looked like a dark jacket. His face was pale, almost luminous in the headlights. I didn't even consider stopping. Company policy was clear. No passengers, no exceptions. Plus, it was nearly midnight on one of the emptiest highways in the country. Nobody hitchhikes on Highway 50 at night. Nobody should be out there at all. I checked my mirrors as I passed. The figure didn't move, didn't turn to watch me drive away, just stood there, thumb out. I looked again 5 seconds later. The shoulder was empty. Not like he'd walked into the darkness, just empty, like he'd never been there. I told myself it was a trick of distance and darkness. Maybe he'd ducked down, or my mirrors weren't catching the right angle. But it bothered me enough that I kept checking the mirrors for the next few miles. At mile marker 28, I saw another one, this time on the left shoulder, same pose, thumb out. As my headlight swept over him, I caught more detail. This figure was wearing clothes that looked wrong for 2021. A wide collared jacket, bell bottom pants, the kind of style you'd see in photographs from the 70s. His hair was long, past his shoulders. I drove past without slowing. Again, I checked the mirrors. Again, the figure vanished from view too quickly, like he'd been erased rather than obscured by distance. My CB crackled. Anybody else seeing them tonight? A male voice, tired, matter of fact. A different voice responded, Yeah, they're out. Don't stop. I grabbed the CB handset. This is the Kenworth westbound at mile 29. Seeing what? Silence for a few seconds. Then the first voice came back. You new to 50? First time running it at night. The hitchhikers. You'll see more of them. Don't stop. Don't even slow down. What are they? I asked. Nothing good. Just keep driving. How do you know they're not real people who need help? Another voice, older, gravelly, cut in. Because some of them have been dead for 30 years. We know their faces. The CB dissolved into static. I tried adjusting the squelch, switching channels, but I couldn't get anyone back. I set the handset down and focused on the road, my hands tight on the wheel. Over the next 40 miles, I saw three more figures, always on the shoulder, always in the hitchhiker pose, always wrong in ways I couldn't fully articulate. One wore a dress that looked like it came from the 50s. Another had no shoes, which made no sense in 40-degree weather. The third stood completely motionless, and when my headlights hit him, his eyes reflected back like an animal's. None of them moved. None of them tracked my truck as it passed. They just stood there, frozen, thumbs out, like mannequins positioned along the highway. By 1:30 a.m., I'd covered 90 miles and was approaching the rest area near Austin. Austin is barely a town, maybe 200 people, but the rest area was one of the few places to stop between Ely and Fallon. I needed to use the restroom and stretch my legs. Sitting for 90 straight miles leaves you stiff. I pulled into the rest area. Three other semis were parked there, all dark, drivers presumably sleeping in their berths. The rest area had basic facilities, a small building with restrooms, some picnic tables, and overhead lights that cast yellow pools across the parking area. The building looked like it had been built in the 80s and hadn't been updated since. I parked away from the other trucks, set the brake, and killed the engine. The sudden silence was profound. No traffic noise, no wind, just the ticking of the engine as it cooled. I climbed down from the cab, my boots hitting the pavement with a sound that seemed too loud. The cold hit me immediately, probably down to the 30s now. I could see my breath. The restroom was empty and fluorescent bright. I took care of business, washed my hands, splashed some water on my face to wake up. When I came back out, I noticed something I had missed before. All three of the other trucks had something hanging from their rearview mirrors. Not the usual fuzzy dice or air fresheners. These looked like small leather pouches, beaded decorations, crosses, other items I couldn't identify from a distance. Protective charms. I walked back to my truck, got my thermos of coffee from the cab, and stood next to the driver's door for a moment, drinking and looking at the stars. The Milky Way was visible, a dense band of light across the sky. Out here, with no light pollution, you could see why people used to think the night sky was something magical. I finished my coffee, did a quick walk around of the truck. Tires looked good, lights were working, cargo straps were tight, everything normal. I climbed back into the cab and immediately smelled something wrong. Wet earth, damp soil, and underneath that, something else. Decay, but not quite rot. More like old flowers left in a vase too long. That sweet, sick smell of organic matter breaking down in stagnant water. I froze, half in the seat, one foot still on the step. The smell was strong, undeniable, completely out of place in a truck cab. I grabbed my flashlight and checked the sleeper berth behind the seats. Empty. I checked the footwells, under the seats, everywhere someone could conceivably hide. Nothing. The smell faded as I searched, getting weaker until it was gone completely. I sat in the driver's seat, doors still open, trying to rationalize it. Maybe something in the cargo had leaked. Maybe I'd tracked something in on my boots. Maybe the rest area's septic system was venting nearby. None of those explanations felt right. I closed the door, started the engine, and got back on the highway. The remaining trucks in the rest area stayed dark, their drivers sleeping or pretending to sleep, and I wondered if they'd smelled it too. The next stretch of Highway 50 is the emptiest part. Between Austin and Fallon, you're crossing pure high desert. No towns, no gas stations, nothing but sagebrush and darkness. The road is straight for miles at a time, slight rises and falls following the contours of ancient lake beds and mountain ranges. At 2:15 a.m., I hadn't seen another vehicle in over 40 minutes. No headlights ahead, no taillights behind, just my truck and the tunnel of light my headlights carved through the darkness. That's when I saw the person lying in the road. The body was positioned across the center line, impossible to miss. I couldn't tell if it was male or female from a distance. just a dark shape sprawled across both lanes. My training kicked in immediately. I started slowing, activating my hazard lights, reaching for the CB handset to call it in. At the same time, my mind was racing through the implications. Out here, in the middle of the night, what were the odds someone was actually hurt versus setting up some kind of roadside robbery? I slowed to 20 miles per hour, watching the shape carefully. My high beams were on, flooding the road with light. The figure sat up. The movement was wrong. The spine bent at angles that weren't natural, sections moving independently like it was segmented. The head rotated too far, a full 180 degrees, facing backward before twisting around to face forward. Then it stood. The movement was fluid and wrong at the same time, like watching a video played in reverse. The figure rose to its feet without using its hands, without the normal mechanics of how a body gets up from lying down. It stood in the middle of the road, facing my truck. As my headlights hit it directly, I saw the face clearly for the first time. Male, maybe 25 years old, wearing clothes from the early 2000s, a style that had been popular when I was a teenager. Baggy jeans, an oversized hoodie, the kind of outfit that dated the figure to a specific era. The eyes were completely black. No whites, no iris, just solid black from corner to corner. The mouth opened, not like a person yawning or speaking. It opened like a snake unhinging its jaw, the mandible dropping far below where it should be able to go, revealing a darkness inside that seemed deeper than the physical space should allow. I accelerated. The truck surged forward, and I swerved slightly to pass around the figure. In the half second I was adjacent to it, I saw those black eyes track my movement. I saw the mouth close in a motion that was too fast, too sharp. Then I was past it. I checked my mirrors. The road behind me was empty. I was shaking, my hands trembling on the wheel. I pushed my speed up to 75, the truck's governor starting to complain. I didn't care. I needed distance. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I tried the CB again, got nothing but static. My cell phone showed no service. I forced myself to take deep breaths, to calm down. I had maybe 90 more miles to Fallon. 90 miles. I could do that. Just keep driving, keep the truck moving, get to civilization. At 3:42 a.m., I checked my rearview mirror out of habit. The back seat was empty. In a semi-cab, there's not really a back seat in the traditional sense. Behind the driver and passenger seats is a small area leading to the sleeper berth. Some trucks have a small jump seat there for additional passengers, though I rarely used mine. The area was visible in my mirror, just barely, the edge of the jump seat and the curtain to the sleeper berth. It was empty. 30 seconds later, I checked again. A man was sitting there, not the figure from the road, different, older, maybe 50, with graying hair and weathered features. He was wearing clothes from the 70s, the same style as one of the hitchhikers I'd passed earlier. A wide collared shirt, faded jeans, a jean jacket. He wasn't moving, wasn't breathing. His chest didn't rise or fall. His eyes were open, staring straight ahead at the back of my head, but they had the fixed quality of a corpse's gaze. I screamed. The sound was involuntary, pure fear. At the same time, I jerked the wheel to the right, a panic response. The truck swerved hard. I felt the trailer start to swing, beginning of a jackknife. The weight distribution shifted wrong, and for a terrifying second, I thought I was going to roll. I corrected, fighting the wheel, downshifting, riding the brake to bleed off speed without locking the wheels. Years of training took over, muscle memory keeping the truck from flipping. The rig straightened out. I was down to 30 miles per hour, my heart absolutely hammering. I looked in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. I looked at the road ahead. The figure was standing there, 50 yards in front of me, directly in my lane. It was the same man who'd been sitting behind me. Same clothes, same weathered face, same posture, standing in the middle of Highway 50, completely still. I didn't slow down. I didn't swerve. I accelerated and drove straight through where he was standing. There was no impact, no sound. The figure just dissipated like smoke, breaking apart as my truck passed through the space it occupied. I kept driving. My hands were locked on the wheel. My jaw was clenched so tight my teeth hurt. I was making small sounds I wasn't aware of, half gasps, half whimpers, but I kept driving. The next hour was the longest of my life. I saw more figures, dozens of them, standing on the shoulders, standing in the road, standing in impossible places, like the middle of the desert, 50 yards from the highway. Some were clear and detailed. Others were translucent, barely visible. All of them watched me pass. At some point, I stopped looking at them. I fixed my eyes on the road directly ahead, on the white line marking the edge of my lane. I didn't check my mirrors. I didn't look at the back seat. I just drove. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the sky began to change. The absolute black of night shifted to deep blue, then purple. The stars faded. The mountains to the east started to show their silhouettes. Dawn was coming. At 5:32 a.m., the first rays of sunlight hit the highway. The change was immediate and dramatic. The figures vanished, not gradually, not fading away. They just stopped appearing. One moment I was surrounded by them, the next the road was completely empty. The last 20 miles into Fallon, I saw nothing, just empty highway, morning light spreading across the desert, normal traffic starting to appear. A pickup truck passed me going east. A sedan overtook me. Regular people doing regular things. I pulled into the truck stop in Fallon at 6:15 a.m., killed the engine, and sat there shaking for a solid 10 minutes. A knock on my window nearly made me jump out of my skin. An older trucker, late 50s, gray beard, weathered face, stood outside my door. He made a rolling motion, indicating I should lower my window. I did. "First time on 50 at night?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Yeah, you've got the look. Saw them, did you?" "What are they?" I managed to ask. He leaned against my door. "Honestly, nobody knows for sure, but they don't come out during the day. Sunlight on the road, they can't hold their shape. That's the boundary. Darkness and dawn. Why doesn't anyone talk about this? Why isn't there a warning?" He laughed, a dry sound. "Who'd believe it? And what would you say? Don't pick up ghost hitchhikers? People already think truckers are crazy from being on the road too long." The CB radio. I started. "Yeah, we've got protocols. Informal stuff, pass driver to driver, certain mile markers. We do radio checks. Confirmation we're clear. It's how we watch out for each other." "Why are they there?" He shrugged. "Highway 50 was built over old immigrant trails, gold rush routes, Pony Express. Before that, Native American trading paths. A lot of people died crossing this desert. Died of thirst, died of exposure, died of who knows what. Some of them are still trying to get where they were going, and some of them," he paused, "some of them want company for the ride." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small turquoise stone, polished smooth. "Keep this on your mirror. Won't stop them from showing up, but they won't get in your cab. Not if you've got protection." I took the stone. "Thank you. One more thing. If you have to drive 50 at night again, and you have to stop, stay in your vehicle until dawn. Don't get out. Don't open your doors. They can't get in unless you invite them, but standing outside, you're fair game. What happens if they get you? I don't know. Nobody who found out ever came back to tell us." He knocked twice on my door, friendly goodbye, and walked back to his own truck. I sat there holding the turquoise stone, feeling the smooth surface, the weight of it in my palm. It was real, solid, physical. Everything else from the night felt like a fever dream, but this stone was proof that I hadn't imagined it, that other people knew, that there were rules for surviving Highway 50 after dark. I hung the stone from my rearview mirror, finishing my paperwork, and drove to the delivery location. I unloaded the cargo, got my signature, and drove back to Salt Lake City using a different route. I took Highway 95 north, then Interstate 80 east. It added 2 hours to my drive time. I didn't care. When I got back to the yard, Carol was still on shift. You made it back, she said. You knew. Yeah. You could have told me what to expect. She looked at me, her expression a mix of sympathy and something else. Resignation, maybe? Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was messing with you? She had a point. The old timers tell the new drivers, she said. That's how it works. You drive 50 at night once, you learn. Then you tell the next guy, I'm not driving it again, I said. Most people don't, but some do. Some people get used to it, learn the rules, carry their protections, make the run. The pay's a little better for 50 at night, hazard premium. I'll pass. She nodded. Can't say I blame you. I drove for the company for another 6 months, then transferred to a different outfit that didn't have any routes through Nevada. I've been driving regional runs in the Midwest for the last 3 years now. Shorter distances, more frequent stops, no overnight runs through empty desert. I still have that turquoise stone. It sits on my desk at home, a reminder of the night I learned that some roads go through places that aren't entirely part of our world, places where the boundaries get thin, where things that should stay buried come up to the surface. I've talked to other truckers over the years, swapping stories in truck stops and rest areas. More than a few have admitted to experiencing something on Highway 50. They don't always agree on the details. Some say the figures are ghosts. Some say there's something else entirely, something that learned to look human but isn't. Some say the desert itself is alive and occasionally reaches out to touch the people crossing it. I don't know what they are. I just know what I saw, and I know I never want to see it again. If you ever have to drive Highway 50 through Nevada at night, keep your doors locked and don't stop for anyone, no matter how real they look or how much they need help. If you see someone in the road, don't swerve, don't slow down, just drive through. They're not solid, and you won't hurt them because they're already gone. And if you smell wet earth and old flowers in your cab, pull over at the next rest stop and wait for dawn. Whatever got in with you can't stay once the sun touches the road. Darkness is their territory. Light is yours. Know the difference. Some roads are lonelier than others, and some roads are lonely because the things that walk them at night don't want to share. The thing wearing my coworker's face asked me to help it across the creek at 4:53 a.m. And the only reason I knew it wasn't really Derek was because I'd watched him drown in that same water 7 hours earlier. Let me explain how we got there. My name is Ryan Kowalski, and in August of 2018, I was working as a land surveyor for a firm out of Duluth, Minnesota. I was 26, relatively new to the profession, but I had done enough backcountry work that they trusted me on remote assignments. The job that month was a boundary survey for a timber company that owned property along the Minnesota-Ontario border, deep in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. For those unfamiliar, the Boundary Waters is over 1 million acres of pristine wilderness, accessible only by canoe or float plane. No roads, no cell service, no easy extraction if something goes wrong. It's the kind of place where you need to be self-sufficient and know what you're doing. I was partnered with Derek Sutton, a senior surveyor who'd been with the firm for 12 years. Derek was 34, experienced in wilderness survey work, and known for being thorough and reliable. We'd worked together before on smaller projects, and I trusted his judgment. The assignment was straightforward on paper: verify and remark property boundaries for a timber tract that hadn't been surveyed since the early 1980s. 5 days in the backcountry, moving from point to point, documenting corners and setting new markers where the old ones had degraded or been lost. We'd carry our equipment in by canoe, camp as we went, and get picked up by float plane at a designated lake on day 6. Our gear included a total station for precise angle measurements, GPS receivers for coordinate verification, boundary markers, field books for documentation, camping equipment, and a satellite phone for emergencies. Everything was packed in waterproof containers and organized in our canoe for portaging between lakes. Before we launched, we stopped at an outfitter in Ely to pick up our backcountry permit. The man who ran the place was an older Ojibwe guy named Tom Whiteadear, probably in his late 60s. While we were checking our maps and going over the route, he noticed the survey coordinates we'd marked. "You're working the eastern section?" he asked. "Yeah, timber company property," Derek said. Tom studied the map for a moment, then tapped a section with his finger. "There are old markers up there, stone cairns. You see those, you leave them alone." Derek smiled. "We're only concerned with the legal boundary markers, property corners." "I'm serious," Tom said, and his tone made both of us pay attention. "Those cairns are older than any property line. They mark boundaries that matter more than what's on your papers. You disturb them, you're breaking an agreement." "Agreement with who?" I asked. Tom looked at me directly. "With what lives there. Just leave them alone." Derek thanked him and we left, but the warning stuck with me. Tom hadn't been joking around or trying to scare us. He'd been genuinely concerned. The first 2 days went smoothly. We made good progress, finding most of the old boundary markers and documenting their condition. The weather was perfect, warm but not hot, clear skies at night. We camped on small islands, hung our food properly to avoid bears, and fell into an easy rhythm of paddling, portaging, and surveying. On day 3, we paddled to the eastern section Tom had pointed out. The coordinates indicated a property corner that should have been marked with an iron rod and cap of standard survey markers from the 1980s. We beached the canoe and hiked inland with our equipment, following the GPS to the exact location. The marker wasn't there. This happened sometimes. Markers got pulled out by frost heave, buried by sediment, knocked over by falling trees. We'd come prepared to search the area and reestablish the corner if necessary. What we found instead was a stone cairn. It was about 4 feet tall, made of carefully stacked stones, each one chosen and placed deliberately. The entire structure was covered in lichen, the kind of growth that takes decades to establish. This wasn't something recent. This cairn had been there for a very long time. It sat almost exactly on the coordinates where our boundary markers should have been. Derek walked around it, checking his GPS unit. "This is the spot. Our corner should be right here." "Maybe the old surveyor used the cairn as a reference point," I suggested. "Maybe. But it's not a legal marker. We need to place our own." I thought about Tom's warning. What if we offset it? Place our marker 5 or 10 feet away, leave the cairn alone? Derek looked at me. "Why would we do that?" The guy at the outfitter said. The guy at the outfitter told us a story. "This is a pile of rocks, Ryan, probably left by hunters or hikers decades ago. We need to mark the actual property corner, not work around decorations." He had a point from a surveying perspective. Our job was to mark the legal boundary accurately, not make allowances for unofficial structures. But something about the cairn made me uneasy. It looked purposeful, positioned, important. Derek started removing stones from the top of the cairn, carefully placing them to the side. "We'll put these back when we're done, but we need to check if there's a marker underneath, and we need to place ours at the exact coordinates." As he removed the fourth stone, I felt the temperature drop. It was subtle but unmistakable, like stepping into a shaded area on a hot day, except we were already in shade and the drop was too sudden. Derek felt it too. He paused, looking around. Wind shifted. There was no wind. The air was completely still. The forest sounds changed. Birds that had been calling back and forth went silent. Insects stopped their buzzing. In the space of maybe 10 seconds, the ambient noise level dropped from normal forest atmosphere to something close to silence. "That's weird," Derek said quietly. We both stood there listening. The only sound was the distant whisper of wind through the upper canopy and our own breathing. Derek shook his head and continued dismantling the cairn. Probably a predator nearby, hawks or something. We removed enough stones to confirm there was no marker underneath, just more stones going down to ground level. The cairn had been built on bare rock, which explained how it had survived so long without collapsing. We set up our total station, shot angles to reference points, confirmed the coordinates, and placed a new boundary marker, a steel rod with a survey cap stamped with the property information and date. The whole process took about an hour. Derek documented everything in his field book, sketches and notes describing the location, the cairn, and our new marker. Professional, thorough, exactly what we were supposed to do. As we packed up our equipment, I looked back at the cairn. We'd restacked the stones, returning it to approximately its original configuration. It looked the same, but something felt different. The air was still cold. The forest was still too quiet. We hiked back to the canoe and continued our survey work, moving to the next corner. By late afternoon, the temperature had returned to normal and the forest sounds had resumed. I convinced myself I'd been overreacting. That night, we camped on a small island in a lake about 2 miles from the cairn site. The island was maybe 50 yards across, mostly bare rock, with a few wind-blown pines. Good camping spot, elevated and dry, with clear sight lines to the water. We set up our tent, cooked dinner on our camp stove, and hung our food pack in a tree away from the tent, standard bear protocol. The sun set around 8:30, painting the lake orange and pink. Beautiful and peaceful. Around 10 p.m., Derek spoke up from inside the tent. You feel like we're being watched? I had been feeling it for the last hour, but hadn't wanted to say anything. Yeah, probably just nerves. We're pretty isolated out here. Probably. We lay there in our sleeping bags, listening. At first, I didn't hear anything unusual. Then I caught it, a splashing sound, rhythmic and deliberate, like something wading through shallow water. I unzipped the tent and looked out. The lake surface was still reflecting stars, no movement visible, but the splashing continued, moving around the island perimeter in a slow circle. What is it? Derek asked. Can't see anything, but something's out there. We grabbed our flashlights and stepped out of the tent. The splashing stopped immediately. We swept our lights across the water, illuminating the rocky shoreline and the dark surface beyond. Nothing. We stood there for 5 minutes, listening and watching. Silence. Moose, maybe, Derek suggested. Or beaver, maybe. We went back into the tent, but neither of us slept well. I kept hearing sounds that might have been wind or waves or something else moving around just beyond the range of our hearing. Morning came as a relief. We broke camp at first light and paddled to the nearest shore to continue our survey work. That's when we noticed the canoe was wrong. We'd beached it the previous evening pointing north, bow up on the rocks, stern in the water, standard position for easy launching. It was now pointing south, fully on the rocks, turned completely around. Did you move the canoe last night? Derek asked. No. Did you? No. We stared at it. The canoe was heavy, loaded with our gear. Moving it that distance and turning it around would have required deliberate effort and made significant noise on the rocks. Wind? I suggested, though I didn't believe it. Wind doesn't pick up a loaded canoe and turn it around. Derek walked over to the tree where we'd hung our food pack. The pack was on the ground, opened, contents scattered, but nothing was missing. Our food was all there, just disturbed and spread out. Bear would have taken food, Derek said, or at least eaten it on the spot. So, what did this? He didn't answer. We repacked the food and loaded the canoe. As Derek was doing a final check of our campsite, making sure we hadn't left anything, he stopped. Ryan, where's my field book? In your pack. It's not. I checked twice. We searched the entire campsite. The field book was gone. It contained 3 days of survey notes, sketches, coordinates, everything we'd documented. Losing it would mean redoing a significant portion of our work. We spent 20 minutes searching, increasingly frustrated, before giving up. We'd have to come back with the float plane and do a more thorough search. We paddled to our next survey point, working the morning in tense silence. Around noon, we decided to return to the cairn site to verify a measurement. The coordinates required us to cross back through that section of the woods. As we approached the cairn, Derek stopped walking. No. What? He was staring at the cairn. Sitting on top of it, Placed carefully in the center was his field book. We were 2 miles from our previous night's camp. There was no way the field book had gotten here by accident or by animal activity. Someone or something had taken it from our camp and brought it here specifically. Derek walked forward slowly, picked up the field book, and flipped through it. All our notes were intact, nothing damaged or disturbed. He looked at me, and I could see he was unsettled in a way I'd never seen before. Derek was the experienced one, the calm professional, but his hands were shaking. "We need to finish this section today and move on," he said. "I don't want to be near here tonight." We worked through the afternoon with focused intensity, trying to complete our survey measurements as quickly as possible without sacrificing accuracy. Derek was quiet, speaking only when necessary to communicate about the work. Around 3 p.m., I noticed he'd stopped responding to my questions. I'd ask him to confirm a reading, and he'd just stand there, staring into the woods. I walked over. "Derek, you okay? Do you see him?" "See who?" "Right there, in the trees. The man watching us." I looked where he was pointing. Dense forest, shadows, tree trunks. No person. "I don't see anyone." "He's right there. Tall guy. Really thin, wearing some kind of fur." I stared harder, trying to see what Derek was seeing. Nothing. "Derek, there's nobody there. He's looking right at us. How can you not see him?" A chill ran down my spine. "Describe exactly what you're seeing." "Maybe 8 feet tall, way too thin to be natural, wearing what looks like old fur clothing, like something from 100 years ago. Long dark hair, and his face." Derek trailed off. "What about his face?" "I can't quite see it clearly, like it's blurred, but he's staring at us. We need to leave. Now." We packed our equipment faster than we ever had, throwing things into bags without our usual care. Derek kept glancing back toward the woods, watching something I couldn't see. As we hiked back toward the canoe, Derek stopped suddenly on the trail. "He's following us." "Can you still see him?" "Yes. He's keeping pace about 50 feet back." "Don't look at him. Just keep moving." We reached the canoe and loaded it quickly. As we paddled away, Derek sat in the bow, occasionally looking back toward the shore. "He's standing on the rocks, watching us," Derek said quietly. I paddled harder. Our planned route required crossing a creek that connected two lakes, a common portage point. The creek was maybe 20 feet wide, knee-deep, with fast-moving water over a rocky bottom. Normally an easy crossing, just wade through carefully and watch your footing. We reached the creek around 4:30 p.m. Derek went first, carrying the more expensive survey equipment in a waterproof pack. I stayed behind to secure the canoe and prepare the rest of our gear. Derek stepped into the water and started across. Midway through, he stopped and looked upstream. "He's in the water with me," Derek said, his voice tight. "Derek, keep moving. He's right next to me. How can you not see him? There's nothing there. Just cross." Derek started to take another step, and then suddenly lurched to the side, like something had pulled his leg out from under him. He went down hard, his upper body hitting the water, the equipment pack going under. The current caught him immediately. This shouldn't have happened. The water was only 3 feet deep. The current wasn't that strong, but Derek was being swept downstream like he weighed nothing. I dropped everything and ran along the bank, trying to keep pace with him. 20 feet downstream, Derek's head broke the surface. His eyes were wide with absolute terror, his mouth open in a gasp. "It's pulling me down," he screamed. Then he went under again. I reached the spot where he'd gone down and plunged into the water. It was shockingly cold, much colder than it should have been in August. I felt around with my feet and hands, searching for Derek in the murky water. My hand hit something, his jacket. I grabbed and pulled. Derek's body came up, heavy and limp. I dragged him toward the bank, my feet slipping on the rocks, the current fighting me. I got him to shore and pulled him fully out of the water. His lips were blue. His eyes were open but not seeing. No pulse in his neck. I started CPR immediately. Chest compressions, rescue breaths, everything I'd been trained to do. I kept at it for what felt like hours but was probably 15 minutes. Derek didn't respond. No cough, no gasp, no return of breath. He was gone. I sat there on the bank, hands on my knees, staring at Derek's body. This shouldn't have been possible. The water was 3 feet deep. Derek was a strong swimmer. The current wasn't dangerous, but he drowned in front of me in water that shouldn't have been able to kill him. I checked my watch. 5:12 p.m. The reality of my situation started sinking in. I was alone in the wilderness, 2 days from our extraction point, with a dead body. I pulled out the satellite phone and powered it on. The connection was poor, cutting in and out, but I managed to get a message through to our firm's emergency contact. Help was coming, but the nearest helicopter base was hours away, and they couldn't fly into this terrain at night. Earliest pickup would be dawn. I'd have to spend the night out here with Derek's body. I found a high spot about 100 yards from the creek, away from the water, with good visibility in all directions. I set up our tent, dragged Derek's body up to the site, and covered him with a tarp. I didn't have the emotional capacity to do anything else. I sat by the tent as the sun went down, watching the woods, listening to every sound. My mind kept replaying Derek drowning, his face as he went under, his scream about something pulling him down. The woods got dark. I had my flashlight, but tried to use it sparingly, not wanting to drain the batteries. The darkness was absolute out here. No moon yet, clouds blocking the stars. Around 10 p.m., I heard Derek's voice. Ryan, Ryan, help me. I'm lost. It came from the woods, off to my left, maybe 50 yards away. I didn't move, didn't respond. Derek's body was 15 feet away from me, covered by a tarp, dead for 5 hours. Ryan, please, I can't find the camp. Help me. The voice was perfect. Derek's tone, his cadence, his speech patterns. If I hadn't been sitting next to his corpse, I would have believed it was him. I'm hurt, Ryan. I need help. The voice moved, circling around my position. It was getting closer. I pulled my knees up to my chest, wrapped my arms around them, and stayed absolutely silent. Whatever was out there using Derek's voice, it wasn't him. The voice kept calling, moving in a slow circle around my camp, sometimes close, sometimes farther away. It called my name probably 100 times over the next several hours, always with slight variations. Ryan, buddy, where are you? Ryan, I'm cold. Ryan, why won't you help me? I didn't answer, didn't acknowledge it. Sat there in the dark, counting my breaths, waiting for dawn. At 4:53 a.m., according to my watch, I saw movement at the edge of my campsite. A figure walked out of the woods. It was Derek. Same height, same build, same clothes he'd been wearing when he drowned. Walking upright, moving with purpose, approaching my camp directly. Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was impossible. Derek was dead. His body was right here, but my eyes were seeing him walk toward me, clear as day in the pre-dawn darkness. The figure stopped at the creek, the small stream that ran behind my camp, maybe 10 feet across, flowing into the larger creek where Derek had died. Derek stood at the edge of the water, looking at me across the distance. Ryan, it said, and the voice was perfect. I need help crossing. Help me across the creek. I stared at it. In the dim light, I could see the details, Derek's face, his features, his hair. But as I watched, I noticed the movements were wrong. When it shifted its weight, the joints bent at slightly incorrect angles. When it tilted its head, the motion was too fluid, lacking the small imperfections of human movement. Come on, Ryan. We're partners. You help me, I help you. That's how it works. Help me across. I remembered Tom Whiteadear's warning about boundaries. I remembered old stories I'd read about crossings and thresholds, about things that needed permission to pass certain barriers. Water, running water. It couldn't cross on its own. Please, Ryan, I just need to get across. That's all. Just help me over, and everything will be fine. The voice was becoming less natural, taking on additional tones, like multiple voices speaking in unison. We work together. You know me. You have to help me. That's the rule. Partners help each other across. I stayed silent, frozen in place. The thing wearing Derek's face started to change. The features remained the same, but became less defined, like I was seeing them through water. The proportions shifted slightly, the eyes getting a bit too large, the mouth a bit too wide. Help me across, Ryan. Let me come over. Invite me across the boundary. You know you should. It's the right thing to do. The human thing. Help your partner. The sky was starting to lighten, the absolute black shifting to deep blue. Dawn was coming. The figure at the creek became more agitated, moving back and forth along the bank, never stepping into the water. Help me across. You have to help me. That's the agreement. That's the boundary law. You help me cross. The voice was fully inhuman now, overlapping tones, Derek's voice layered with something else, something that made my ears hurt. The first rays of sunlight broke over the trees to the east, touching the creek water with golden light. The figure stopped moving. It stood absolutely still for a moment, then began to dissipate, breaking apart like morning mist in sunshine. In seconds, it was gone completely, leaving no trace it had ever been there. I sat there shaking, unable to move, barely able to breathe. The helicopter arrived at 7:35 a.m. The pilot radioed ahead that he'd spotted my signal mirror. Two paramedics came down, followed by a recovery team. They found me sitting next to Derek's body, unresponsive to questions at first. They asked me what happened. I told them Derek drowned in the creek, that I'd tried CPR, that I'd called it in. They asked if I was injured. I said no. They didn't ask why I looked like I'd aged 10 years overnight. The medical examiner's initial report called it accidental drowning, but the detailed autopsy findings were noted as unusual. The water in Derek's lungs was silty, full of organic matter and sediment, like he'd been underwater for weeks instead of hours. The tissue damage was inconsistent with the short time frame. The examiner couldn't explain it, settled on atypical drowning with unclear environmental factors. Our firm conducted an investigation into the incident. They found no negligence on my part, no equipment failure, no obvious explanation for why an experienced surveyor would drown in 3 feet of moving water. They ruled it an accident and closed the case. 2 weeks after Derek's death, I was called into a meeting with one of the senior surveyors, a man named James Redsky. He was 52, Ojibwe, and had worked in the Boundary Waters area his entire career. He asked me to walk him through what happened, every detail. I gave him the official version at first, the same one I'd told the investigators. He listened without interrupting, then asked, "What really happened, Ryan?" I looked at him, trying to decide if I could trust him with the truth. "You saw something," he said. "I can tell. And you found something you weren't supposed to disturb, didn't you?" I told him about the cairn, about moving it to place our survey marker. James nodded slowly. Those cairns mark places where the boundary between worlds is thin. They're older than any property line, older than any treaty. The people who built them understood something we've forgotten, that some places need to be marked, not because they're ours, but because they're not. What took Derek? I asked. Something that's been there a long time, something that's tied to that place, that boundary. You moved the marker, opened a door that was meant to stay closed. Whatever is on the other side saw an opportunity. It tried to get me to help it across the water because that's one of the few rules they still have to follow. Running water is a boundary they can't cross without permission, without someone from this side helping them over. If you'd agreed, if you'd reached out to help it, you would have invited it across. And once it was across, there'd be no sending it back. Why Derek and not me? James shrugged. Maybe he saw it first. Maybe it chose him. Maybe it was random. We don't know all the rules, just the ones we've learned through hard experience. What happened to his body? The examiner said the water in his lungs didn't make sense. Because he didn't drown in the creek you saw. He drowned in something else. Somewhere else. The thing that took him pulled him into its space. Its version of that water. When you pulled him out, you pulled out what it left behind. I sat there processing this. I watched him die. I know. and I'm sorry. But you survived because you knew not to help it across. Someone warned you, probably, and you listened. Tom Deer at the outfitter. Tom knows. A lot of the elders know. We pass the stories down because every few years someone doesn't listen and something like this happens. James pulled out a map and marked the location of the cairn with a red pen. I'm adding this to our records. Historical site. Do not disturb. Nobody from our firm will move it again. I left the firm a month later, couldn't stay in the profession, couldn't go back into the backcountry. The thought of being out there, isolated, in places where the boundaries are thin, it was too much. I work in an office now, doing GIS mapping, computer-based survey analysis. I stay in well-lit rooms in populated areas. I don't go camping anymore. I don't even like being alone in the woods during the day. Sometimes I still hear Derek's voice calling my name, asking me to help him across. I know it's just my memory, just trauma playing tricks. But it sounds so real, so much like him, that I have to remind myself Derek is gone. Whatever used his face at that creek, whatever called to me from the darkness, that wasn't him. The real Derek drowned trying to fight something off, trying to get away from something that pulled him under in water that shouldn't have been deep enough to drown in. And I couldn't save him because by the time I reached him, he was already gone, already taken. If you're ever working in the backcountry and you find stone markers that aren't on any map, especially cairns that look ancient and deliberately placed, leave them alone. They're not just survey marks. They're not decorations. They're warnings. They're boundaries that were placed for a reason, agreements made long ago to keep certain things on their side and us on ours. And if someone you know dies in the wilderness and you later see them walking around asking for help crossing water, don't help them. Don't speak to them. Don't acknowledge them. Whatever's wearing that face isn't your friend anymore. It's something else, something that learned how to look like them, how to sound like them, how to use everything you cared about to get you to break the rules. The only thing keeping it on the other side is that boundary, that running water, that line it can't cross without your permission. The moment you help it across, the moment you invite it into your world, you've broken the agreement and there's no putting it back. Water is a boundary. Respect it. And if something asks you to help it cross, ask yourself why it can't cross on its own. The answer to that question might save your life. The voice on the emergency channel at 2:38 a.m. said it was calling from Ranger Station 7, requesting immediate assistance with a wounded hiker. The problem was I was standing inside Ranger Station 7, and I was the only person there. Let me back up and explain how I got to that point. My name's Jacob Reeves, and in July of 2022, I was working as a fire lookout operator for the Forest Service in the Gila National Forest, New Mexico. I was 29, had been with the Forest Service for 5 years, and this was my second season working fire lookouts. If you're not familiar with the job, fire lookouts are stationed in towers during fire season to spot smoke early, report coordinates, and monitor weather conditions. It's solitary work, usually 2-week rotations, living alone in a small cabin at the top of a tower with nothing but radio communication to the outside world. The tower I'd been assigned to was designated Lookout Station 12, located in the remote eastern section of the Gila. The tower itself was a 40-foot steel structure with an enclosed cabin at the top, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet, with windows on all sides providing 360-degree visibility. The cabin contained an Osborne fire finder, a circular map table with a sighting device for pinpointing smoke locations, along with weather instruments, binoculars, radio equipment, and basic living necessities. Bed, small propane stove, storage for 2 weeks of food and water. Access was via a steep metal staircase that wrapped around the tower's exterior. The stairs were loud, each step producing a distinct metallic ring that you could hear clearly from inside the cabin. This was actually a safety feature you always knew when someone or something was approaching. Station 12 had been problematic that season. The previous operator A guy named Mitchell Torres had quit after only 9 days, right in the middle of his rotation. This was unusual. Lookout operators were typically reliable, used to isolation, and committed to finishing their assignments. When Mitchell quit, he had called for an emergency extraction, claiming he needed to leave immediately for personal reasons. The Forest Service had to scramble to find a replacement, which is how I ended up there, despite having requested a different tower. When the helicopter dropped me off on day one, the pilot mentioned that Mitchell had left in a hurry, hadn't even packed all his personal items. Guy seemed really shaken up, the pilot said. Wouldn't talk about what happened, just wanted out. I found Mitchell's belongings still in the cabin. Some clothes, a paperback book, his personal logbook that he'd kept separate from the official fire log. I flipped through the personal logbook while unpacking my gear. The entries started normal enough, routine observations about weather and wildlife. But after day 3, the tone changed. Day 4, unusual radio traffic today. Calls from towers that don't match the rotation schedule. Day 5, they're using our call signs. Voices sound right, but information is wrong. Day 6, don't answer voices that sound wrong. Trust your instinct. Day 7, something is learning our protocols. It knows the check-in times, the frequencies, the call signs, but it makes mistakes, small ones. Day 8, I can hear myself on the radio talking to HQ, but I'm not transmitting. It's saying things I would say, getting coordinates wrong on purpose, leading them away from the real fires. Day 9, I'm not sleeping anymore. They're outside at night. I can hear them on the stairs. Tomorrow I'm calling for extraction. This tower is wrong. That was the last entry. I set the logbook aside and told myself Mitchell had probably just cracked under the isolation. It happens sometimes. People underestimate how psychologically demanding it is to be alone for 2 weeks with nothing but your own thoughts and the occasional radio call. My first 3 days were completely routine. I settled into the rhythm of the work. Wake at dawn, take weather readings, scan the horizon for smoke, log observations, check in with HQ at 6 a.m., monitor throughout the day, report any changes, evening check in at 6 p.m., basic maintenance, reading, early to bed. The isolation was actually peaceful. I had done this before and knew how to handle it. On day 4, at 3 p.m., my radio crackled. Station 12, this is Tower 9, requesting weather report. Over. I picked up the handset. Tower 9, this is Station 12. Current conditions are clear skies. Temperature 84 degrees. Wind from the southwest at 7 miles per hour. Humidity 32%. Over. Copy that. Station 12. Thank you. Tower 9 out. Standard exchange. Professional, routine, nothing unusual. The voice had sounded male, middle-aged, calm. I logged the call in my communications record and thought nothing of it. That evening, during my 6 p.m. check-in, my supervisor Sam Chen asked if I'd heard from any other towers that day. Yeah, Tower 9 called for a weather report around 3 p.m. Silence on the other end for a moment. Then Sam said, Jacob, Tower 9 has been abandoned since 2019. Equipment's still up there, but we haven't staffed it for 3 years. Budget cuts. I definitely talked to someone identifying as Tower 9. Do you have a recording? All our radio communications were automatically recorded. I checked the system and confirmed the call was logged. Yeah, it's here. Want me to send it? Please. I transmitted the audio file. Sam was quiet while he listened to it. Then he said, Jacob, I'm hearing mostly static. There's something underneath it that might be words, but it's too distorted to make out clearly. You're sure this is what you heard? I heard it clearly. Full conversation. Someone asking for weather data. Professional radio protocol. Okay. Note it in your log. If you get any more calls that seem off, document everything and let me know immediately. Sam, what's going on? Probably just equipment malfunction. Radio signals can bounce weird in the mountains, pick up old recordings, that kind of thing. Just stay alert. He signed off. but I could tell he was more concerned than he wanted to admit. That night, I pulled out Mitchell's logbook again and read through it more carefully. His description of unusual radio traffic matched what I had just experienced. I read his entries about voices using correct call signs but providing wrong information, about something learning protocols but making small mistakes. I decided to be more careful about verifying radio calls. Day 5 started normally, but around 10 a.m., I received another call. Station 12, this is Station 4. We've got smoke visible to your north. Can you confirm? Over. I scanned to the north with my binoculars. Clear skies, no smoke. Station 4, I'm not seeing any smoke to my north. Can you provide more specific coordinates? Over. Approximately 15 degrees from your position, maybe 3 miles out. Over. I used the Osborne Firefinder sighted to 15 degrees north. Nothing but forested ridgeline, no smoke visible. Station 4, I have a negative on smoke at that location. Skies are clear. Over. Understood. Must have been cloud shadow. Station 4 out. I logged the call and made a note. Station 4 reported smoke that wasn't there. At 11:30, another call came in. Station 12, this is HQ, requesting updated wind speed and direction. Over. I gave the current readings. The voice sounded like Sam. Same tone and cadence, but something about the phrasing felt slightly off. Sam usually said, "Can I get wind readings?" not requesting wind speed and direction. Small difference, but noticeable. Copy that. Station 12. HQ out. At my regular 6 p.m. check-in, the real Sam called. I asked him if he'd contacted me at 11:30 for wind data. No. Our morning check-in was the last time I called you directly. Why? Because someone identifying as HQ called for wind readings at 11:30. What did the voice sound like? Like you, actually. But the phrasing was a little formal. Sam was quiet for a moment. Jacob, I need to tell you something. Station 12 has a history. 3 operators before Mitchell reported similar experiences. Unusual radio calls, voices that sounded right but weren't quite accurate. We've had the equipment checked multiple times, never found any technical issues. What do you think is causing it? I don't know. But Mitchell's report before he left mentioned he felt like something was learning to imitate our communications. He thought something was listening to our radio traffic and trying to replicate it. Something like what? He didn't specify, just said he felt unsafe and needed immediate extraction. Look, I can pull you out if you want. No questions asked, no negative marks on your record. I thought about it. I'd signed on for 2 weeks, and I was only on day 5. The calls were weird, but I hadn't felt physically threatened. I decided to stick it out. I'll stay, but I'm documenting everything carefully. Good. Trust your instincts, Jacob. If something feels wrong, don't engage. And if you need extraction, just call. Any time, day or night. That night, I couldn't sleep well. Every small sound seemed amplified. The tower creaked in the wind. The metal contracted as temperatures dropped. Normal sounds, but in the darkness they felt ominous. Around 2 a.m., I heard something that wasn't normal. Footsteps on the stairs. The distinctive metallic ring of boots on steel. Someone climbing steadily upward. I sat up in bed, grabbed my flashlight, and moved to the door. The cabin door was locked from the inside. Standard security protocol. Hello? Who's there? I called out. The footsteps continued, steady and methodical, getting closer. I put my eye to the small window in the door. The exterior was dark, my flashlight beam not quite reaching the stairs from this angle, but I could hear the footsteps clearly now, maybe 10 steps away from the cabin level. Identify yourself. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I heard breathing, slow and steady. Then the door handle turned. The handle rotated slowly from the outside, testing the lock. The door held. I stepped back, heart pounding, flashlight pointed at the door. The handle stopped moving. There was silence for maybe 10 seconds. Then the footsteps descended. the same steady pace, ringing on each metal step going down. I rushed to the window facing the stairs and shone my flashlight down. I could see maybe 30 feet of the staircase below me. Nothing. No person. No movement. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. In the morning, I went down to check the stairs. Halfway up, about 20 feet above ground level, I found wet boot prints. They were clear impressions. Water still pooled in the tread patterns. But the prints stopped abruptly. They didn't continue up to the cabin, and they didn't continue down to the ground. Just a cluster of wet prints in the middle of the staircase, as if someone had materialized there, stood for a moment, and vanished. I examined the prints more closely. The tread pattern was familiar. I put my boot next to one of the prints. Perfect match. Same size, same wear pattern, same distinctive scuff on the heel that my boots had developed. Someone or something had been on my stairs wearing boots identical to mine. I photographed the prints and sent the images to Sam during my morning check-in. I told him about the footsteps during the night, the door handle turning, the prints that started and stopped in the middle of the stairs. Sam was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Jacob, I think you should come out. This is matching Mitchell's reports almost exactly." He mentioned hearing his own footsteps on the stairs when he was inside the cabin. How many days was Mitchell here when that started happening? Day 7. I'm on day 6. Exactly. There's a pattern. It seems to escalate around day 3 or 4, peaks around day 7 or 8. I don't want you to become another emergency extraction. Give me 2 more days. If it gets worse, I'll call for pickup. Jacob. 2 days, Sam. I'll be careful. He reluctantly agreed, but I could tell he wasn't happy about it. Day 7 started with my morning check-in at 6 a.m. Sam called exactly on time, and we ran through the standard report: weather, visibility, any smoke sightings, equipment status, everything normal. At 8:15, I received a call from HQ. Station 12, this is HQ. You missed your morning check-in. Is everything all right? Over. I stared at the radio. HQ, this is Station 12. I completed my check-in at 6 a.m. with Sam Chen. Over. Station 12, we have no record of your 6 a.m. check-in. Our logs show your last contact was yesterday evening at 6 p.m. Over. That's impossible. I talked to Sam for 6 minutes this morning. I have the call logged. Stand by. Station 12. A minute later, a different voice came on. Sam's voice. The real Sam. Jacob, it's Sam. I need you to tell me exactly what we talked about this morning. Weather report. Visibility status. I mentioned seeing a hawk near the tower yesterday. You asked about my water supply and reminded me about the cold front moving in tonight. Jacob, I didn't call you this morning. I just got into the office 15 minutes ago. I haven't made any calls yet today. Cold dread settled in my stomach. Then who did I talk to? I don't know. But we have a recording of someone using your call sign checking in at 5:57 a.m. I'm listening to it now. It's your voice, your speech patterns. But the information is wrong. This recording has you reporting smoke to the southwest, which you just told me you haven't seen. Someone's impersonating me on the radio. Yes, and they're doing it well. Well enough that it fooled our system logging for a few minutes before we caught the discrepancy. What do they want? I don't know. But, Jacob, I really think you should come out today, right now. I can have a helicopter there in 2 hours. I looked around the cabin. Daylight, clear skies, everything peaceful. But I remembered the footsteps, the boot prints, the calls that sounded right but were wrong. I remembered Mitchell's final log entry. This tower is wrong. Send the helicopter, I said. I'll pack up and be ready. Smart decision. I'll call you back when the bird is in the air. I started packing immediately, throwing my gear into bags without my usual organization. I wanted to be ready to go the moment the helicopter arrived. At 10:30, my radio crackled with an emergency call. Station 12. This is Ranger Station 7. We have an emergency situation requesting immediate assistance. Over. Ranger Station 7 was a small facility about 15 miles northeast of my tower, usually staffed by 2 rangers during peak season. I grabbed the handset. Ranger Station 7, this is Station 12. What is the nature of your emergency? Over. We have a seriously injured hiker. Fell during a climb. Possible spinal injury. We need additional personnel to stabilize and evacuate. Can you respond? Over. Ranger Station 7. I'm a lookout operator. I don't have medical training or evacuation equipment. Have you contacted SAR dispatch? Over. SAR is responding, but they're 90 minutes out. We need someone now. You're the closest person to us. We need you to come help. Over. Something about the call felt wrong. Protocol in this situation would be to contact SAR directly, not ask an isolated lookout operator to abandon their post. Lookouts never left their towers during active fire season. It was a fundamental rule. Ranger Station 7. What is the hiker's name and how did they reach your location? Over. Pause. Longer than it should be. Hiker's name is Michael Davidson. He was day hiking the Lost Creek Trail. Over. Ranger Station 7. Can you describe the hiker's injuries in more detail? Over. Another long pause. Multiple contusions. Possible fracture to left leg. Disoriented. We need assistance now. Over. The answers were vague, lacking the specific detail the trained rangers would provide. They should have been giving me exact injury descriptions, vital signs, specific coordinates. Ranger Station 7, who am I speaking with? Please identify. Over. Silence. Ranger Station 7, please identify yourself. Over. The voice that came back was slightly different, the same tone but less natural, more mechanical. This is Ranger Station 7. We need you to come down from your tower. We need assistance. You have to help. Over. Negative. Ranger Station 7. I am not authorized to abandon my post. Contact SAR for emergency response. Station 12 out. I switched off that frequency and immediately called Sam on the primary channel. Sam, I just got a call from Ranger Station 7 claiming they have an injured hiker and demanding I leave my tower to help. It didn't sound right. Jacob, Ranger Station 7 is closed for renovations. It's been unstaffed for 2 weeks. Nobody should be calling from that location. Someone is, and they're trying to get me to leave the tower. Do not leave the tower. Do you understand me? Stay where you are. The helicopter is 30 minutes out. I'm not going anywhere. But the calls continued throughout the day. Different voices, different emergencies, all asking me to come down, to leave the tower, to help someone who needed me immediately. I stopped answering after the first few, just monitored the radio and waited for the helicopter. Around 2 p.m., Sam called with bad news. Jacob, the helicopter had a mechanical issue. They had to turn back. We're scrambling another bird, but it won't be there until tomorrow morning at the earliest. You're telling me I have to spend another night here? I'm sorry. Weather's clear, so first light tomorrow will get you out. Can you handle one more night? I looked around the cabin. Still daylight, everything visible, nothing threatening, but I thought about what might happen after dark. I'll handle it. Lock everything down. Don't answer any radio calls except from me on the primary frequency. And Jacob, don't leave the tower. No matter what you hear, no matter who calls for help, stay inside. Understood. I spent the afternoon preparing. I checked all the locks, secured everything that could be secured, organized my gear so I could grab it and run if the helicopter arrived. I ate an early dinner and watched the sun go down, dreading what the night might bring. At 2:38 a.m., I woke to an emergency tone on the radio. The emergency frequency was reserved for critical situations, life-threatening events, immediate danger. Hearing that tone meant someone was in serious trouble. I grabbed the handset, still half asleep. This is Station 12, responding to emergency call. Over. Jacob, it's Sam. We have a critical situation. There's a lost child in the area near your tower. 6-year-old girl, separated from her family camping group. Parents are frantic. We need you to search the immediate area around your tower. She might have wandered toward your light. The voice was Sam's. Perfect intonation, his specific way of speaking, his cadence and rhythm. If I hadn't been paying attention, I would have believed it completely. But Something made me pause. Sam would never ask me to leave the tower at night for a search. He'd have search and rescue teams mobilize, coordinate with local law enforcement, follow proper procedures. He wouldn't send an isolated lookout operator into the dark alone. Sam, what did we talk about last week during the training refresher? We discussed fire identification protocols and updating the equipment inventory. And that was correct. We had covered those topics. What was the name of the restaurant where the team had lunch after training? That Italian place in Silver City, the one with the murals. Also correct. Maria's Italian Kitchen, known for its wall murals. I was running out of verification questions. Everything it said was accurate, but something still felt wrong. Sam, what's my sister's name? Long pause, longer than any previous answer. Emily? I don't have a sister, Sam. Silence, complete silence on the radio. Then the voice came back, but it was different now. Still Sam's voice, but layered with other voices, multiple tones speaking in near unison, slightly out of sync. Come down from the tower. Come help us find the child. We need you down here. Come down. Come down now. I dropped the handset like it had burned me. The voice continued broadcasting even though I wasn't holding the transmit button. Jacob Reeves, lookout operator, Station 12. We need you to come down. People are hurt. A child is missing. You have to help. It's your duty. Come down the stairs. Come down now. I backed away from the radio equipment, my heart hammering. The voice was growing louder, more insistent, the multiple layers becoming more obvious. I moved to the windows, looking down at the base of the tower. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the ground 40 feet below. Figures were standing in a circle around the tower base, at least 6 or 7 of them, perfectly spaced, all motionless. They were wearing Forest Service uniforms, Ranger outfits, the same gear I was wearing. The flashlight caught their faces briefly as I swept across them. The faces were wrong. They had the basic structure of human faces, the right number of features in approximately the right places, but the proportions were off. Eyes slightly too large, mouths a bit too wide, all the features too symmetrical, too perfect, like masks made by someone who understood human anatomy in theory but had never actually looked at a real human face. The radio continued its layered broadcast. Come down, Jacob. We're waiting. We need you. Come help us. Come down the stairs. Come down. I grabbed my own radio, the personal one I used for backup, and tried to reach the real Sam on an alternate frequency. Static. I tried another frequency. More static. Looking down at the figures again, I noticed something. They were standing in a circle around the tower, but none of them had moved closer to the base. None of them had even shifted position. They were maintaining the same radius, like there was an invisible line they couldn't or wouldn't cross. The tower itself was the boundary, elevated, metal, above ground level. They couldn't climb it, or they needed me to come down first to leave the safety of the elevation voluntarily. I killed my flashlight and moved away from the windows. I sat in the center of the cabin in the darkest spot and waited. The radio broadcast continued for another hour. The voice cycled through different people I knew. Sam, other rangers, even my mother's voice at one point, all asking me to come down, all insisting I needed to help, all growing more desperate and less human sounding. I watched the windows, checking the mirrors I'd positioned for monitoring different angles. The figures below remained in their circle, unmoving. At some point, I must have dozed off despite my fear, because I woke to the sound of silence. The radio had stopped broadcasting. I checked my watch. 5:42 a.m. Dawn was breaking, pale light creeping across the sky to the east. I moved to the window and looked down. The circle of figures was gone. The ground around the tower base was empty. At 6 a.m. exactly, my radio crackled with Sam's voice. The real Sam this time, I could tell immediately. Station 12, this is HQ. Morning check-in. How are you doing up there? Over. I picked up the handset carefully. Sam, before we continue, tell me something only you would know. What did your daughter give you for your birthday last month? A fishing lure she made in art class. It was terrible. Doesn't look like it would catch anything, but I loved it anyway. Jacob, is that really you? It's me. And Sam, you need to know what happened last night. I told him everything. The emergency call, the voice using his identity, the verification test that failed, the multiple voices, the figures at the tower base. Sam listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, the helicopter will be there in 40 minutes. Pack up everything. You're coming out. What is this, Sam? What's happening at this tower? I don't know exactly, but Station 12 is too far out, too isolated. It's right on the edge of the wilderness, a boundary point. And something about the radio signals, the electromagnetic radiation, the constant broadcasting it attracts something that's been listening to us for a long time, learning how we communicate, learning to imitate us. Why can't they climb the tower? Because you're elevated above ground level. It seems to be a threshold they can't cross without permission. The moment you come down voluntarily, especially to help them, you've accepted their invitation. You've crossed into their space. How long has this been going on? We've had reports going back to 2015 when this tower was first built. We keep staffing it because we need the coverage for fire season, but we know it's problematic. Most operators can handle a week or so before the psychological pressure gets too intense. You made it to day 8. That's actually longer than most. Mitchell lasted 9 days. Mitchell was stubborn, wouldn't admit anything was wrong until it got really bad. His final night, he barricaded himself in the cabin and called for emergency extraction at 3 a.m. What happened to the operators before Mitchell? 2 quit early, said they felt unsafe but didn't provide details. 1 finished his full rotation but refused to ever staff a lookout tower again. Said he'd work any other position but not towers. He wouldn't explain why. The helicopter arrived at 6:37 a.m. I had never been so relieved to hear rotor blades. I grabbed my pack bags and descended the stairs for the last time, moving quickly, not looking at the forest around the tower base. The pilot loaded my gear and we lifted off. As we gained altitude, I looked down at Station 12. From above, I could see the clearing around the tower base. In the soft dirt, visible even from this height, was a perfect circle of boot prints surrounding the tower, all facing inward, all the same size and pattern. My boots. I pointed them out to the pilot. He nodded. Yeah, that happens sometimes, usually gone by midday when the sun hits them. How often do you extract people from that tower early? This season, you're the third. Last year, 5 out of 6 operators left before their rotation ended. Station 12 has a reputation. Most guys won't take it anymore. So why do they keep staffing it? Because it's good fire coverage, and somebody has to do it, always hoping the next person will be the one who can handle it long term. I spent the rest of the helicopter ride in silence, watching the forest pass below us, thinking about those figures in their circle, about the voices that had learned to sound so perfectly human, or about the boot prints that matched mine exactly. Back at headquarters, I filed my report. I documented every unusual radio call, every incident, every detail I could remember. Sam added my report to a file that was already thick with similar accounts. What happens now? I asked. You take a few days off. Then we assign you to a different position. Ground-based ranger work, visitor center, trail maintenance, whatever you want. No more lookout towers. And Station 12? We'll staff it with someone new, someone who hasn't heard the stories. Maybe they'll last longer without the psychological burden of knowing what might happen. That seems cruel. That seems necessary. We need fire coverage in that area. I transferred to trail maintenance work after that. I spend my days marking paths, clearing deadfall, maintaining signs, ground level work, nothing isolated, nothing elevated, nothing involving radio communication beyond basic check-ins on my cell phone. I still have dreams about that night, though. I dream I'm back in the tower, and I can hear them at the base, calling up to me in voices I recognize, asking me to come down, to help them, to leave my safe elevation and join them on the ground. In the dreams, I sometimes go down the stairs. I walk to meet them to help with whatever emergency they're describing. And when I reach the ground, when my boots touch the earth at the tower base, I see their faces clearly for the first time. They're wearing my face, all of them, different bodies, different sizes, but every single one has learned to copy my features, my expressions, the way I move and speak. And they smile, all those faces that look like mine, and they welcome me into their circle. That's when I wake up. I don't know what they are. Sam doesn't know. Nobody knows. We just know that some places, especially boundary places, especially elevated places where we project signals into the wilderness, those places attract something, something that listens, that learns, that tries to communicate in ways that are almost right but fundamentally wrong. If you're ever working alone in a remote location with radio communication and you start getting calls that seem slightly off, trust your instinct. If someone calls for emergency help but the details don't add up, if voices sound right but the words are wrong, if you're asked to leave safety to help someone in a way that breaks protocol, don't do it. Verify everything. Ask questions only the real person would know. Make the questions specific, personal, impossible to guess. And if something asks you to come down, to come out, to leave your safe position to help them, remember this. If they were really human, they'd understand why you need to stay put. They'd understand protocol exists for a reason. The fact that they're insisting, that they're pressuring you, that they're trying every emotional manipulation to get you to abandon safety, that's how you know they're not what they claim to be. Elevation is a boundary. So is protocol. So is daylight. Know your boundaries and don't cross them, no matter how human the voice sounds asking you to. Some things have learned to speak our language, to use our names, to replicate our voices with startling accuracy, but they can't quite replicate our humanity, our understanding of why we follow certain rules, our instinct for what's truly safe versus what just sounds safe. Listen to that instinct. It might save your life. And if you're ever offered a position at Lookout Station 12 in the Gila National Forest, politely decline. Trust me on this. Some jobs aren't worth the pay, no matter how good the view is. The security camera showed me locking the front door from the outside at 11:47 p.m., walking to my car, and driving away. The problem was, I was still inside the building, watching this footage in real time, and I hadn't left my desk all night. Let me explain how I ended up in that situation. My name's Daniel Torres, and in November of 2023, I was working as an overnight security guard for a property management company in rural Oregon. I was 33, had been doing security work for about 6 years, and had worked plenty of empty buildings at night, warehouses, office complexes, retail spaces during renovation. The solitude never bothered me. I actually preferred it to dealing with people. The assignment that month was a decommissioned medical research facility about 40 minutes outside of Portland. The facility had been closed down earlier that year after the research company relocated to a larger campus. The building was being prepared for sale, which meant most of the equipment had been removed, all the research materials had been transferred, and the place was essentially an empty shell with some remaining furniture and infrastructure. My job was simple: work the overnight shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Monday through Friday, walk patrol routes every 2 hours, monitor the security camera system, log any incidents, and make sure nobody broke in to vandalize or steal the remaining fixtures. Easy work, decent pay, minimal interaction with anyone. The building itself was a single-story structure, maybe 30,000 square feet, divided into four wings that branched off from a central lobby. East wing had been administrative offices, west wing was laboratories, north wing was more offices and conference rooms, and south wing housed mechanical systems and storage. Most rooms were empty now, just bare walls and carpet, fluorescent lights that hummed when you turned them on. The security office was located just off the main lobby, a small room with a desk, multiple monitors showing feeds from 16 cameras positioned throughout the building, and a computer system for logging patrols and incidents. Each room in the building had an electronic checkpoint that I had to scan with my keycard during patrols to prove I'd physically checked that location. On my first day, the property manager, a woman named Sandra Chen, gave me a brief orientation. She showed me the patrol routes, explained the camera system, and walked me through the logging procedures. Everything straightforward, standard security protocol. As she was leaving, she mentioned almost casually, "You're the third guard we've had here this month. The first guy quit after 1 week, said the place was too creepy. The second lasted 2 weeks. What made him quit?" I asked. He didn't really explain, just turned in his key card and said he wasn't coming back. Left a note in the logbook, something about the cameras, but it didn't make much sense. She showed me the logbook. The previous guard's final entry read, "Don't trust the cameras after 3 a.m. They show things that don't match reality. I'm done." Sandra rolled her eyes. Some people can't handle working alone at night. Too much imagination, you know? Anyway, you seem more level headed. Think you can handle it? I told her I could. I'd worked plenty of overnight shifts, and a mostly empty building didn't scare me. My first 2 nights were completely routine. I arrived at 11 p.m., relieved the day shift guard who covered the evening hours, and settled into the security office. I'd walk my patrol routes at midnight, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., and 6 a.m., checking each wing systematically, scanning the keycard checkpoints, making sure all the doors were locked and nothing looked disturbed. The building was quiet but not unsettling, just the normal sounds of a large empty space. HVAC systems cycling on and off, the occasional creak of the structure settling, the hum of fluorescent lights in the corridors. I'd bring a book, monitor the cameras, and the nights passed without incident. Night 3 started the same way. I arrived at 10:55 p.m., signed in, and took over from the evening guard, a guy named Marcus who seemed relieved to leave. "Building's all yours," he said, grabbing his jacket. "Everything's quiet tonight. Cameras are all working. No issues to report." I settled into the security office, checked the camera feeds, and logged into the system. 16 monitors showing different areas of the building: lobby, corridors, entry points, a few interior rooms. Everything looked normal. Empty hallways, closed doors, occasional motion from air currents, moving papers, or ceiling tiles. At midnight, I started my patrol. I grabbed my flashlight and key card, left the security office, and began walking the predetermined route through the building. West Wing first, checking offices and lab spaces, scanning my card at each checkpoint. The rooms were bare, just empty rectangles with fluorescent lights and that distinctive smell of cleaned commercial carpet. About halfway through the West Wing, maybe 12:15 a.m., I heard something. Footsteps, distinct and clear, coming from the direction of the central lobby. Heavy boots on tile floor, walking steadily. I stopped moving and listened. The footsteps continued for maybe 10 seconds, then stopped. I called out, "Hello? Marcus? Did you come back?" No response. I walked quickly back toward the lobby, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkened corridors. The lobby was empty. I checked the security office, also empty, exactly as I had left it. I checked the front door. Locked, chain still in place from the inside. Nobody had entered or left. Probably the building settling, I told myself. Sound carries weird in empty spaces. I returned to the security office and decided to review the camera footage from the last 15 minutes just to satisfy my curiosity. I pulled up the feed from camera 2, which covered the lobby and the entrance to the security office. The footage showed me sitting at the desk for the entire time. From midnight to 12:15, I was visible on camera, sitting in the security office, apparently reviewing something on the computer, but I hadn't been there. I had been walking the West Wing. I had the scan checkpoints on my keycard to prove it. I pulled up the card reader log. Sure enough, my card had scanned at WW3, WW5, and WW7 between midnight and 12:15. I'd physically been in the West Wing scanning checkpoints, but the camera clearly showed me in the security office. I sat there trying to make sense of it. Could the footage be delayed, showing recorded material instead of live feed? I checked the timestamp. It matched the current time exactly. This was supposedly live footage, not a recording. I reviewed other camera angles from the same time period. Camera 5, covering the West Wing corridor where I'd actually been walking. The hallway appeared empty in the footage. No sign of me. Two different records of the same 15 minutes. My key card said I was in the West Wing. The camera said I was in the security office. Both couldn't be true, but I had evidence for both. I tried to rationalize it. Camera malfunction, software glitch, something wrong with the timestamp system. But the more I looked at the footage, the more unsettled I became because the figure in the security office wasn't just sitting there randomly. It was moving naturally, shifting position, typing occasionally, behaving exactly like I would if I were actually sitting at that desk. I decided to be more careful during my next patrol, to specifically watch for discrepancies. At 1:30 a.m., while monitoring the cameras, I saw movement on camera 4, which covered a corridor in the east wing. A figure walked into frame from the left, moving down the hallway at a steady pace. The figure was wearing a security uniform identical to mine: dark pants, light blue shirt, the same style of boots I was wearing. As the figure walked closer to the camera, I could see more details. Same height as me, same build, same way of walking with a slight favor to the right leg from an old knee injury. The figure stopped directly under camera 4 and looked up. I was staring at my own face on the monitor, not similar, not someone who looked like me. My face. Same features, same facial structure, the same slight asymmetry where my nose had been broken years ago and healed a bit crooked. Even the same way I held my mouth, a habit I'd never noticed until I saw it mirrored back at me. The figure on the camera smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. Then it waved at the camera, a small gesture, almost friendly. I was already moving, running from the security office toward the east wing. It took maybe 45 seconds to reach the corridor where camera 4 was positioned. The hallway was empty. I walked the entire length, checking every door, every room that branched off. Nothing. Nobody. I returned to the security office and immediately pulled up the footage from camera 4, rewinding to the moment I'd seen the figure. The footage showed me running into frame from the left, looking around frantically, checking doors. It showed my actual patrol, what I had just done. There was no sign of the figure I'd seen, no sign of anyone else in the corridor, but I'd watched it happen. I'd seen it in real time on the monitor, seen the figure walk down the hallway, look at the camera, smile, and wave. I checked the timestamp again. No discrepancy. The footage was supposedly showing real time events. I spent the next 30 minutes reviewing all the camera feeds, watching for any sign of the figure. Nothing appeared. All cameras showed empty rooms and corridors. At 2:15 a.m., I was still at the desk, trying to make sense of what I'd seen when all 16 monitors suddenly flickered. When the image stabilized, each camera was showing something different, but all disturbing. Camera 1, lobby, showed me standing near the front door, perfectly still, facing the exit. Camera 3, security office, showed me sitting at the desk, exactly where I actually was. Camera 5, north wing, showed me walking down a corridor, patrol route in progress. Camera 7, south wing stairwell, showed me standing on the stairs, facing the wall, not moving. Camera 9, west wing, showed me in an empty office, standing in the corner. Camera 11, east wing, showed me sitting on the floor in a hallway, knees pulled up to chest. All of these versions of me were visible simultaneously, all doing different things, The one in the stairwell was especially wrong, standing too close to the wall, posture unnatural, head tilted at an angle that looked painful. The one in the lobby was watching the front door with an intensity that seemed predatory, like it was waiting for something specific. I stared at the monitors, my rational mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. This wasn't possible. I was in one location, the security office. I couldn't be in multiple places simultaneously. As I watched, all the figures on all the cameras turned to look at their respective cameras at the exact same moment. All of them smiled, the exact same smile, synchronized perfectly across all 16 screens. Then every monitor cut to static. The security office lights flickered once, twice, then held steady. The monitors came back on, cycling through their boot up sequence. When the camera feeds returned, all 16 showed exactly what they should show: empty rooms, empty corridors, no figures, no anomalies. I sat there, hands shaking, trying to control my breathing. What I'd just seen wasn't a glitch. Glitches don't coordinate across multiple cameras. Glitches don't smile. At 3 a.m., the office phone rang. I stared at it for 3 rings before picking it up. Security office. My own voice came through the speaker. You should leave. Go home. Your shift is over. I gripped the phone tighter. My shift ends at 7 a.m. No, my voice said, calm and matter of fact. You already left. You're not here anymore. Go home. I'm talking to you right now. I'm clearly here. Are you? Check camera one. Check what you did. The line went dead. I slowly set the phone down and looked at the monitor showing a camera one, the front entrance. I rewound the footage, going back through the last few hours. At 11:47 p.m., the footage showed me walking to the front door from inside. I watched myself unlock the chain, open the door, step outside, lock the door from the exterior side, walk across the parking lot to my car, get in, and drive away. But that was impossible. I'd arrived at 10:55 p.m. and I'd been inside the building ever since. I hadn't left. I rewound further, back to 11 p.m. The footage clearly showed me arriving, parking my car, walking to the front door, unlocking it, entering the building, locking it behind me. Both pieces of footage existed. Both were timestamped. Both appeared to be real, unedited video. According to the cameras, I had entered the building at 11 p.m. and exited the building at 11:47 p.m., but I was still here. I'd been here the entire time. I existed in two states simultaneously. I was both inside and outside the building. According to the security system, I had both stayed and left. I pulled up my keycard logs, the checkpoints I had been scanning during patrols. The log showed continuous activity. I'd scanned checkpoints at midnight, 12:30, 1 a.m., 1:30, 2 a.m. The electronic record clearly indicated I'd been moving through the building all night. But the camera footage showed me leaving at 11:47 p.m. Two different systems, two different realities, both claiming to show the truth. At 3:37 a.m., I had a terrible realization. If the camera showed me leaving the building, if the footage indicated I'd exited at 11:47 p.m., then according to the security system, the building should be empty right now. Nobody should be inside. But I was inside. According to the cameras, I was a version that shouldn't exist, an anomaly, a contradiction in the record. What happens to things that don't match the official record? The motion sensors started triggering. I had dozens of motion sensors positioned throughout the building, infrared detectors that would alert me if anything moved in the monitored areas. They'd been quiet all night. Now they were all triggering simultaneously, every sensor in every room showing active motion, the computer screen filled with alerts, dozens of red indicators flashing across the building map. I looked at the camera monitors. Every camera showed a figure in a security uniform. Multiple figures, dozens of them, all wearing my face. They were standing in corridors, in rooms, in stairwells, all motionless, all staring at their respective cameras. As I watched, they started moving. They began walking through the building in a coordinated pattern, like they were conducting a systematic search, checking rooms, opening doors, moving through each wing with purpose. They were looking for something. They were looking for me. The version of me that didn't match the footage, the version that shouldn't exist because the camera showed I'd already left. I watched them converge, moving closer to the central lobby, closer to the security office. On camera 8, I could see 3 of them in the West Wing corridor, walking shoulder to shoulder. On camera 12, 2 more approaching from the North Wing. I locked the security office door, a flimsy barrier that wouldn't hold against determined pressure, but it was all I had. I needed to leave, actually leave, get outside the building. But the figures were between me and all the main exits. Front door, rear emergency exit, loading dock entrance, all blocked by versions of myself, methodically searching. Then I remembered the basement service tunnel. The building had an old service tunnel that connected the south wing basement to a utility shed outside. It was original infrastructure from when the building was first constructed, predating the modern security system. There were no cameras in that tunnel, no electronic checkpoints, no motion sensors. It was a direct physical route outside that bypassed all the monitored areas. I grabbed my keys and flashlight. On the monitors, I could see the figures had reached the lobby, at least 5 of them, spreading out, checking each doorway systematically. I had maybe 2 minutes before they reached the security office. I unlocked the door and moved quickly through the lobby, staying low, heading for the south wing corridor that led to the basement stairs. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Multiple sets, heavy boots on tile, moving in unison. I ran down the south wing corridor, through the door to the basement stairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. The basement was darker, emergency lighting only, casting long shadows. The service tunnel entrance was at the far end of the basement, a heavy metal door that I'd noticed during my first patrol but hadn't thought about since. I found it, pulled it open. Beyond was darkness and the smell of damp concrete. I stepped into the tunnel, using my phone's flashlight to illuminate the path ahead. The tunnel was about 6 feet wide, concrete walls and floor, with exposed pipes and conduit running along the ceiling. It stretched ahead into darkness, maybe 100 yards to the exterior exit. Behind me, I heard the basement door open, footsteps on the stairs, multiple sets descending. They'd found me. I ran down the tunnel, phone light bouncing wildly. My footsteps echoed off the concrete, mixing with the sounds of pursuit behind me. I could hear them in the tunnel now, multiple sets of boots, running in perfect synchronization. The exit door appeared ahead, a rectangle of slightly lighter darkness. I hit it at full speed, shoulder slamming into the push bar, and burst out into the parking lot. Cold air hit my face. The sky was starting to lighten. Dawn may be 40 minutes away. I ran to my car, fumbling with my keys, got the door open and threw myself inside. I started the engine and reversed out of the spot, headlights sweeping across the building. The service tunnel exit door was closed. No one emerged. No figure standing in the parking lot. I put the car in drive and accelerated toward the access road, watching the building shrink in my rearview mirror. I checked the dashboard clock. 4:23 a.m. I'd escaped. I was outside. The building was behind me, getting farther away with every second. I picked up my phone to call Sandra, to report what happened, to tell someone what I had experienced. The phone screen showed 7:42 a.m. I looked at the dashboard clock again. Still showed 4:23 a.m. I pulled over to the side of the road, compared the times. My phone said 7:42 a.m. The car clock said 4:23 a.m. My watch, which I'd been wearing all night, said 4:23 a.m. I had lost over 3 hours somewhere between the tunnel and the parking lot. Time had jumped forward, or I'd jumped forward. or something had happened that I couldn't remember or perceive. I sat there on the side of the road as the sun came up, trying to make sense of it. Eventually, I drove home, called in sick, and slept for 12 hours. The next day, I met with Sandra to file my incident report. I told her everything: the figures on the cameras, the phone call in my own voice, the footage showing me leaving when I hadn't left, the versions of myself searching the building. She listened without interrupting, her expression carefully neutral. When I finished, she said, "Let me pull up the security footage from last night." She logged into the system and pulled up the recordings from my shift. We watched together. The footage showed a completely normal night. It showed me arriving at 10:55 p.m., taking over from Marcus, sitting at the security desk. It showed me conducting patrols at midnight, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., and 6 a.m., walking the routes normally, scanning checkpoints. It showed me sitting in the security office between patrols, reading a book, occasionally checking the monitors. At 7 a.m., the footage showed me gathering my things, logging out of the system, locking up the building, and leaving through the front door. A completely routine shift, nothing unusual. No figures, no anomalies, no emergency exit through the service tunnel at 4:23 a.m. "Daniel," Sandra said carefully, "this footage shows you worked a full, normal shift. Are you feeling okay? Are you getting enough sleep?" "I didn't work until 7 a.m. I left at 4:23 through the basement tunnel." She pulled up the key card access logs. "Your card shows you scanned checkpoints throughout the entire shift, including the 6 a.m. patrol. And there's no record of you accessing the basement or the service tunnel. Check the motion sensors. They all triggered at once, every sensor in the building." She pulled up the motion sensor logs. No unusual activity recorded, a few routine triggers from HVAC air movement, but nothing abnormal. I stared at the computer screen. According to every system they had worked a complete, normal shift. The version of me that had panicked and fled through the tunnel, that version didn't exist in any record. The version that stayed, that completed the patrol routes, that left at the scheduled time through the proper exit, that was what the building kept. "I think maybe you should take a few days off," Sandra said gently. "Overnight shifts can be disorienting. Sometimes people experience what seems like sleepwalking or waking dreams. It's more common than you'd think." I wanted to argue, to insist I knew what I'd experienced. But looking at the footage, looking at the logs, I had no evidence. Just my memory against a complete record that contradicted everything I claimed. "I quit," I said. Sandra looked surprised. "Are you sure? You've been doing good work?" "I'm sure. I can't work there anymore." She didn't argue, just processed my resignation and had me turn in my keycard and security badge. I left the office and sat in my car for a long time, thinking about what had happened. The building had created two versions of me that night. One version that followed the routine, completed the shift properly, maintained the pattern, and one version that broke pattern, that recognized something was wrong and tried to escape. The building chose which version to keep: the obedient one, the one that matched what was supposed to happen. The version that fled I was that version, but according to the official record, I didn't exist. That version of the night never happened. I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't made it to that service tunnel, if those figures had caught me before I reached the exit. Would I have simply stopped existing? Would the building have erased the discrepancy, leaving only the version that showed up in the security footage, the version that completed a normal shift? I don't know. I don't want to know. I heard later that the facility hired another night guard, someone new who lasted about 2 weeks before quitting, then another guard who quit after 1 week. The pattern continued. The building kept trying to find someone who would work nights without questioning what the camera showed. Maybe one of those guards is still there, working night after night, not noticing that the footage doesn't quite match their memory, not realizing they're slowly being replaced by the version the building prefers. Or maybe the building hasn't found the right person yet, someone who can exist in that space without creating contradictions without generating versions that don't match the official record. I work day shifts now, office buildings, retail stores, places with multiple people around, places where the camera footage gets reviewed regularly by multiple staff members, places where reality is witnessed by enough people that it can't be quietly edited. I don't work alone in empty buildings anymore. I don't trust what cameras show after dark. I don't trust my own memory against an electronic record because I learned that night that some places have the power to decide what's real. They can create official records that overwrite your experience, that make you the anomaly, the version that doesn't fit. And if you're the wrong version, the one that breaks the pattern, the building will correct that error one way or another. If you ever work security in an empty building at night and you start seeing yourself on the cameras doing things you're not doing, leave immediately. Don't wait to figure out what's happening. Don't try to catch your double. Don't investigate. Just go. Because what's happening is the building is deciding which version of you is real, the one who follows the routine and completes the shift, or the one who breaks pattern and tries to leave. And if the camera starts showing you've already left when you're still inside, that means the building has made its choice. You're the wrong version. You're the one that doesn't fit the pattern, and the building will correct that error. The only boundary that matters is the physical exit. Get outside before the building resolves the paradox, because the way it resolves paradoxes is by making you match what the cameras show, which means making the version that's still inside stop existing permanently. Some places keep their own records of what happens inside them, and sometimes those records don't match reality. And when they don't match, the place gets to decide which version stays and which version gets erased. Make sure you're the version that leaves on time, the version that follows the pattern, because the building always keeps that version. It's the version that tries to escape, that recognizes something's wrong, that one gets corrected. And I don't know what being corrected means, because I barely made it out. But I know I'll never work overnight security again.